Thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here today to show you one line of my research examining the developmental trade-offs of social media use. Child development, 350 likes? I'll never be able to do that. She is incredible and accomplished way more than I ever will. These are my gut reactions to seeing these social media posts. Even though I logically know that people present filtered versions of reality, I still find myself automatically and uncontrollably comparing the worst version of myself to what I see. And it often makes me feel stressed and bad about myself. But my life wasn't always that way. I'm old enough where I did not grow up with social media or cell phones, and Facebook came out when I was a freshman in college with the ability to share photos when I was studying abroad at Oxford. These are my very first Facebook photos. And at that time, everyone I knew was constantly online, constantly on Facebook. I had to know what other people were doing, and I had to let them know what I was up to. But as I got older and more platforms came out, and I began reflecting on how social media was making me feel, I also wondered how it was affecting others. And about 95% of young adults in America use social media on a daily basis. Think about that. That's only 5% off of basic regulatory functions like eating or sleeping that 100% of humans engage in on a daily basis. And any behavior that is this ubiquitous is critically important for us to understand. I decided to start with anxiety, given the ways that social media can evoke negative self-reflections like the ones I expressed earlier. And at that time, and the world wants to know too. There are many news articles devoted to social media, stress, and anxiety. But shockingly, when looking into the literature, I realized that there wasn't actually a lot of research examining this specific association. So we conducted a study with 600 young adults from across the US and found that the more time they spent using social media on a daily basis, depicted on the x-axis, the more symptoms of anxiety they endorsed, shown on the y-axis. We also found that the higher social media use that young adults reported, the more likely they were to experience severe functional impairments from their anxiety at a level indicating the presence of a probable anxiety disorder. And so following this initial work, I turned to other potentially maladaptive outcomes, like risky behaviors. And in this meta-analysis comprised of 27 cross-sectional studies and more than 67,000 teens, which are all shown on the y-axis here in this figure, we found that there was a consistent positive association between the time teens spent using social media and their engagement in risky behaviors. And this included substance abuse, high-risk sexual encounters, and violence-related behaviors. And these correlations are depicted here on the x-axis, and for each individual study shown in pink, with the average study effect of 0.21 shown in blue. But I was left wondering, what about the positive effects of social media use? What about developmental changes over time? Most studies are cross-sectional. How do these processes play out in young teens who are really just beginning to use social media during a developmental period with a heightened neurobiological sensitivity to both positive and negative social stimuli? I also wondered, what about the different types of users rather than just one overall metric? And so I began to shift toward applying a person-centered approach, examining a broader range of outcomes over time. So we surveyed young teens and about 1,400 young teens and found that there were 3 types of social media users in our sample. About 40% were samplers of social media, shown in blue here, who logged into 1 or 2 apps, mostly Instagram, but pretty infrequently. Just about over half of our group were devotees to specifically image-based platforms, including Instagram and Snapchat. And then we also found that there was a small proportion of youth of teens who were frequently using nearly all social media platforms and were basically chained to their phones all day long. And this latter group experienced worsening psychological functioning across virtually all domains 6 months later, including increases in anxiety, depressive symptoms, delinquent behaviors, family conflict, and they also had decreases in perceived social support from family and friends, and skills in forming and maintaining close friendships. This was in stark contrast to our other two subgroups, which were associated with distinct adaptive and maladaptive developmental trade-offs. Our Instagram and Snapchat devotees reported the greatest increases in friendship skills, as well as the greatest increases in perceived support from friends. And they also had lower levels of depressive symptoms and family conflict. But they did also still experience increases in delinquent behaviors and anxiety-related school avoidance, though not to the same extent as our high social media use subgroups. And we thought that maybe these are the teens who are primarily using social media to build upon in-person friendships and connect with other known peers. And it's possible that these slight increases in delinquency could be normative increases in risk-taking behavior that you see during this period. Unlike the devotees, our samplers of Instagram mostly had the greatest decreases in friend support and skills in forming and maintaining close friendships, more so than even that first high social media user group. But these individuals also did have very decreases in anxiety, depressive symptoms, delinquent behaviors, and family conflict, as well as increases in family support. So we thought that these kids could potentially be those kids who have parental restrictions on their social media use, or they may turn to other activities to fulfill their needs for connection, entertainment, self-expression. But it seems that regardless of why they're using it, these dabblers may be missing out on what may be now an essential experience of age-appropriate peer experiences. And so what I didn't tell you about my early social media use was that it wasn't all doom and gloom. Much like my Instagram and Snapchat devotees that I just described, I primarily use social media to enrich my offline friendships. And these are two of my greatest benefits from social media, Sarah and Will. We met in our early days at Oxford, and while we have visited back and forth with each other, on the right here, they're at their very first American Thanksgiving. But our friendship of 15 years is mostly entirely maintained over old school Facebook messaging. And so I'm still reaping the benefits of that. And so far, this research has been overly focused on one domain of social media use, the total amount of time spent. But assessing social media use platforms, like we do basic regulatory functions such as sleep, may allow us to have more fine-grained characterizations of social media use. With sleep, it's not just the duration that matters for health, but it's also the sleep quality, our biological rhythms, our sleep debt, and associated feelings, among other behaviors. And these same constructs can apply to the assessment of social media use patterns. And we're fortunate now that technological advances can allow us to assess these types of behaviors with minimal burden to participants. And we can also harness the advances in computational science and use machine learning to handle the very high dimensionality of these data while making it more digestible for us. And I expect that increasing our measurement sensitivity of social media use will provide additional links to mental health and also identify specific intervention targets. But where do social media use patterns come from? They don't develop in a vacuum. So similar to assessment, there are also really great theories to understand the developmental origins of self-regulation. And I expect that applying similar models to social media use patterns will uncover more about the adaptive and maladaptive functions that social media can serve for different people. I suspect in particular that early caregiving experiences may play a role because they profoundly shape neural, emotional, and social development across the lifespan. Therefore, caregiving-related adversities such as abuse, neglect, and caregiving disruptions are potentially salient precursors. as well as children's attachment, because we know that attachment forms the basis of internal working models of ourself, of others, and of the world. And it also shapes our behavior and how we act within close social relationships. And just might how early environments influence people's social media consumption right now in their current lives, I think that at least one reason may be the brain and its representations of affective interpersonal concepts, such as those related to social media, like getting a like or dislike. And these representations, I expect, are the connective tissue between how early life experiences influence how people later in life really make meaning of the content they're consuming, and it also influences their psychological responses to social media. And we can also here harness machine learning techniques to these data to really help us move closer to understanding why social media use may enrich some people's lives while harming others, as well as improve our predictions about who may be at risk. Thank you so much. I wouldn't be here without the support and guidance of my incredible mentors, Nim Tottenham, who is my PhD mentor, expanding my view of what is possible in science, Chris Ohanesian, who really introduced me to developmental science, and Andy De Los Reyes, who really reached out to me out of nowhere via email with an offer to mentor me. And he also is really the driver behind JCCAP and this fantastic event. Thank you so much.